Hello, and welcome to today's Parasoft webinar called Strengthening DevOps Team Collaboration for Better Test Automation. Before we get started today on today's presentation, let's begin with a brief overview of the Zoom webinar interface. Please use the Q&A window to submit your questions for us to answer at the end of the session. And feel free to chat with the panelists and attendees in the webinar chat window. Be sure to change the drop-down at the bottom of your window to be able to share your message with the whole group. And as we usually do, the slides and recording for this event will be available and posted in a few days. Now let's move on to today's topic. I am Joy Ruff, the Product Marketing Manager for the Parasoft Continuous Quality Suite. Joining me today is Chris Colosimo, the Product Manager for this product suite. In today's session, I will discuss the challenges of DevOps team collaboration, and Chris will demonstrate how you can strengthen collaboration within your team with enhanced capabilities available in the latest release of our products. So given the current state of the country and the world, I'm guessing that many of you are currently working from home, as I am, and as are your teammates. Keeping a team productive after a quick shift to a remote work model can be difficult. Remote and distributed teams, especially DevOps testing teams, must deal with a lot of challenges to keep your projects running smoothly. DevOps team members can sometimes fall back into their siloed past if they aren't careful. Each person will be affected differently, but you may experience issues in one or more areas, such as emotional struggles, communication issues, access to information and infrastructure, and release coordination. If you're feeling cut off from the team, you may feel less motivated to be productive. If you don't feel like you're being heard in meetings, you may not be sharing necessary information or speaking up to address issues. And if you're not comfortable with the online tools, it can be difficult to ask for help. And it's easy to misunderstand or misinterpret someone's intentions if you're not able to see and hear them directly. But above all, be kind to yourself and others while you're social distancing. Be conscientious, sympathetic, and patient with your collaborators, and find ways to encourage your teammates and restore their sense of control. Share your knowledge and best practices to help the team work better together. And if you'd like to share with us, please enter in the chat window what challenges you personally are facing with working remotely. Ensure that you take the time you need to work through each of these challenges as an individual and as a member of a productive team. Now, we've got 4 tips to help with enabling your remote teams. First of all, recognize that this situation is not really business as usual. Managers especially need to be aware of the impacts to their employees' home and work lives, which may be factors, may be closely intertwined because of family members sharing the same workspace. Be sure to understand those factors and provide flexibility to enable your team to do their best work under the circumstances, offering assistance if needed. Also, schedule regular check-in meetings at whatever frequency makes sense for you and your team. Many Agile teams are used to having a daily checkpoint to know what has completed and what to work on next. If possible, create a dedicated space for mental decompression, perhaps a team room to share jokes and other general information. It's natural to use your communication tools for social interaction as well as work-related activities to take the place of those face-to-face conversations. Lastly, be sure everyone has access to the tools they need to get their jobs done. Many DevOps continuous development processes and tools have been built to accommodate decentralized teams, but it also helps to use collaboration tools and systems such as Slack, Google Docs, or Teams. Video conferencing enables the team to interact with each other and discuss their thoughts and ideas. Change tracking, along with instant messaging, can provide the ability for you and your team to stay in touch and in sync. But try to keep the tooling to a necessary minimum. Don't go crazy with using too many platforms simultaneously. Here at Parasoft, we use JIRA, Trello, and SharePoint, but there are so many different tools to choose from. As an Agile DevOps team, be smart about which ones you use and how you use them. Select those that help your team work together more effectively. The driving force behind DevOps is the strong belief that communication and cooperation will lead to the resolution of any problems. Having your communication channels worked out will lay the foundation for keeping the DevOps workflow running smoothly so that development and delivery can maintain their momentum even when the team is not co-located. It's still important to deliver a quality experience, especially now because it's easy for users to switch to another vendor option in most cases. So be sure to continue your efforts to implement and streamline your test automation within your CI/CD pipeline and fully validate your applications before they go out the door. Most DevOps teams are turning to tools that incorporate artificial intelligence and machine learning to increase their productivity and extend the range of their work and maintain a continuous workflow. Now I'll hand it over to Chris to show you how you can leverage new features to improve your software quality.
Thanks, Joy. Can you hear me?
Yes, great.
All right. So with this latest release of Parasoft, we really have focused on exactly what Joy is talking about, the ability to enable teams to collaborate, plan more effectively, work together as a team. And specifically in these enhancements, we've added some new capability to the continuous testing platform to enable requirements traceability for API tests, a new deployments dashboard for, service virtualization to allow you to holistically manage all virtual assets and inventory, an update to the REST API to make it easier to interact with the solutions programmatically, and then some more fine-grained permissions when it comes to executing test jobs. We've also enhanced our core technology service virtualization to make it easier to simulate some of the complex stuff. And I know that's somewhat of an ambiguous statement. So what I'd like to do is to show a demonstration of how these different pieces work. So I'm going to start by talking about how we can collaborate and prioritize our testing efforts by associating test cases with the requirements, and then show how we can centrally manage test artifacts in our test ecosystem, and both collaborate through the cloud and on premise, and then show how we can simulate those missing dependencies. So let's go ahead and start with the collaboration process. And so to do that, what I'm going to do is I'm going to jump into the Parasoft continuous testing platform. This is a browser-based interface onto the technology that can be hosted on-prem, as well as, if required, up in the cloud. And what it does is it gives me a library of test cases, virtual services, test data, as well as showing me the different environments that I'm executing my test cases in. Now, what I'm going to do is just go through a day in the life and show how the collaboration process works, as well as showing how I can associate test cases with requirements. And so to do that today, I have some requirements to do some testing inside of my Salesforce application. Now, the ability to use AI to build API tests against solutions like Salesforce was released a while ago for Parasoft, but I always really like this as a demonstration because I think a lot of people are struggling with this. And so why not interleave it into what we're doing today? So what I'm going to do today is I'm going to test a flow against some contacts, which actually is a requirement that I have inside of my work item system, JIRA. And so to do that, I need to create a test. So let me start by creating a test. And so to do that, I'm going to use the Parasoft recorder to record the API traffic that is produced as I interact with my Salesforce application. I'll go ahead and turn that guy on, enter my credentials, and log in. So today, as I said, the requirement says I need to be able to add and successfully delete a contact from my CRM system. So here, I'm going to go into my contacts area. You see I have two contacts, Lisa and Bart. I'm going to go ahead and create a new contact. We'll call this one Homer Simpson. And there are some required fields here. One of them is email. We'll just email@email.com. And then of course, I think the final required field I have to have here is where that lead came from. And so here we'll say discover.org and I'll save. Okay, there we go. Homer Simpson was created. So now I want to go ahead and validate the second piece, which is that contact can be deleted. So I'll go ahead and delete that contact. Okay, I'm back down to 2. So I'll go ahead and log out of the application, and that should be everything that I need to test that flow. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to tell the platform to create an API test for me. So I'll go ahead and say stop recording, and we'll say this API test is going to be called Salesforce contacts. I want to go ahead and associate this with a requirement in my work item system. In particular, I'm working on a test plan. I'm going to call this guy Yan1, as it's a part of my Yan project. And then I'm just going to put in a work item URL. This will start the process of synchronizing this with my work item system. So I'll go ahead and create this test artifact. The AI is just going to think for a second. And what it's doing right now is it's looking for patterns and relationships in the underlying API traffic, and then it creates a test in my platform. So I'll just take this, it'll bring me right back to the platform. Let me just log in here. Go ahead and say log me in automatically so I can save some time. And here we go, my test. So again, this was introduced a couple of versions back, but it's a really nice way to get into API testing, especially when you have limited domain knowledge of how the application works. In particular, for Salesforce, the AI really takes into account Aura tokens and negotiates all of the communication, as well as adding smart data transfer tools like JSON databanks to make sure that your API tests work. In particular, in this test, you'll notice here at the top, though, I have a requirement. And so when I execute this test, the information pass-fail criteria from this will be reported back through my reporting and analytics dashboard to the system of record. And so I'm just going to verify that this test does what I want it to do. So I'm going to go ahead and log into Salesforce over here and go to my contacts, which I think is under more contacts. Okay, and I'll put this guy over on this side, and I'll use this to just execute the test. And what we should see is that as we go through and all those APIs get called, we should see a new contact show up. It does just take a second because it is making quite a few API calls. Yep, there it is, okay. And then if everything works successfully, this should just delete itself. Yep, there we go. Okay, great. So my API test is great, works inside of my system, but oh, there's something interesting about it. Okay, now we put a defect in here just to demonstrate. There's something that maybe isn't working with this particular content door information, but that's okay because now I can associate that information with that requirement that I have inside of my requirements management system. So what's happening here is that the information from these test cases is being, all the information from my API tests, my UI tests, my unit tests, it's all being sent from my API testing platform into my Parasoft Analytics dashboard. There's a lot of value here. I can see test results over time. I can see them by build. I can see trending information, pass, fail. But I can also see the stories that I have inside of my work item systems. So in this particular case, there's many stories that I'm validating. I can see each one of those stories. I can see the number of tests, pass, fail. And because we're also aggregating static analysis and unit testing values, results, I can also see if test cases are covered the files and even looking to see if there's code review information. If I were to dive back into this, I could then see the details associated with each of my individual stories, the actual results from those test cases, and then if need be, I can traverse all the way back to my original system of record to see if that value, to see if that requirement is covered and get a single pane of information to understand which tests I have, which tests have test cases, and then I can even drill down and see the history of execution for those individual test cases. And this is quite powerful because this really enables remote teams to plan and collaborate and associate their testing activities against their original work items in the system of record, and then prioritize those findings in accordance to whatever business has determined are those critical areas that we need to look into. And so that's one key area where we can really help remote teams plan and collaborate testing activities. So specifically, the new feature in SOAtest is the ability to associate work items with test cases using an @test annotation, and then that will push that information into the Parasoft Analytics dashboard so that you can then plan and associate those test cases with requirements and traceability for prioritization. But the really interesting part was all of that took place inside of the browser. And this is really key, especially when we're strengthening DevOps team collaboration. We need to have a place where testers, developers, DevOps engineers can work together while still having the power required from their testing tools. So there's this challenge, right? When you're working as a remote team, automation works best when everybody is all in. Now, some folks like to have the purely browser-based experience, ad hoc usage. I don't want to install a tool. I just want to be able to play in the browser, especially when we're remote. But you also have your center of excellence teams that need to be able to create artifacts, powerful artifacts on their desktops. Without having a centralized dashboard for planning, linking these two types of testing activities together, you can have redundancy in test creation. You can find that you have missing test cases or a lack of knowledge for creating those test cases. And so our continuous testing platform provides a central authority that synchronizes desktops on-prem or on your laptop with the browser-based access to the technology and allows you to create test cases, deploy those test cases into environments with virtual services, and then execute them. So the continuous testing platform is a combination of powerful desktops and a browser-based interface and a system of record that holds all of your test cases, virtual services, and test data. So we've been living in this a little bit throughout the demonstration. So I'm gonna go back to this and talk about a specific enhancement that we've done to this dashboard. So here I was inside of my API testing engine. This piece in particular is actually synchronized with a Docker instance that I have running in my, at Parasoft, but also I have a desktop. And so, this is a SOAtest API testing desktop here on my laptop in my home office. And what I've done is I've connected the desktop to the server. And so this is how teams who want to use the desktop can collaborate really effectively. You can then go and find any of the artifacts, like for example, here's the test case that we just created, Salesforce Contacts. I can grab that, I can copy it down to my workspace, or I could pull it through source control, whatever makes the most sense to me. And then I'll have that whole test suite right here in my desktop. I could then work on the on the test case, make whatever manipulation I need to, adding different test cases or assertions. I can then push that test artifact right back up into the cloud, overwriting whatever artifacts are there. And that's how we can effectively work as a team in both the browser and on the desktop. The actual cloud environment supports not only API tests, but virtual services, test data, as well as an environments-based approach to testing, where we define each of our test environments as a sequence of flows. And within those test environments, there are flows that we're trying to validate. We can associate those test artifacts as well as virtual services so that we can make sure that if we have environments with unstable dependencies or dependencies that don't have the right test data, we can then pop in virtual services as required and provision on the fly. Now, in this particular release, we have the ability to centrally coordinate the test environment and the test artifacts, but we've added a new capability around service virtualization to not only manage the actual artifacts, but manage the deployments of those artifacts. So here what I have is a new UI that shows all of my servers that I have for virtualization. It also shows which artifacts I have deployed: virtual services, proxies for recording traffic. I can easily see which artifacts are deployed. I can see ROI information, like how often are they hit, what's their current transaction per second, what's the average response time of that simulated service. I can see how long my servers have been up. I can also enable and disable activity right here in the browser, as well as starting to monitor on each one of my individual services. The monitoring is important because if I have a service that's misbehaving from a data or a performance perspective, I can identify that service and then jump over into my new events monitoring framework, look at each one of those services that are currently deployed, look at the individual traffic for each one of those services, maybe drill down to a specific artifact. Maybe in this case, I only want to look at those that are associated with this application. Maybe look at particular traffic associated with that. And if I find an error at a certain point in time, I can go ahead and copy all those transactions and create a traffic file that could then be used to create an API test, just like we did with Salesforce, or I could use to create a brand new virtual service. And again, all of this is available on the desktops. In the latest release, we've brought that capability up into the browser to enable remote teams to work effectively in that environment. So again, specifically, the enhancements are the new deployments dashboard and the new event messages framework that will allow administrators to holistically view their inventory and allow users to get access to monitoring of individual services without having to have the desktop. And so with those key enhancements and the entire continuous testing platform, you can centrally manage your test environments and deployments and enable remote teams to access technology without having to have the desktop. Okay, now we've been talking a little bit about virtual services, but I wanna talk about how we create those virtual services and specific enhancements that we've made in 2020.1 to make that a lot easier. And so I'm actually going to introduce the topic here. It's sequence responders. So a sequence responder is a new responder type that allows you to record a sequence of events in your environment and then play those events back in order. Now, traditional virtual services are created in such a way where we can abstract what response resources or different actions are being performed, and then create different responders for each one of those actions, and then abstract the data into a data repository or a data model. And that's great because you can create services that are, they live a long time. You can change them easily using our change management workflows. You can manipulate just the data, but sometimes you don't need that. Sometimes you just need the shotgun approach. You just want to create a really quick and dirty virtual service that responds exactly the same way that it was designed. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to show you how these responders work. And so to do that, I'm going to go to my desktop this time, and I'm going to go to my Asset Explorer, and I'm going to look at a sequence responder. So a sequence responder is fairly simple. You just define each one of the different responses that you want in your service. You can do anything, and here I'm just doing, simple HTML, but you could put JSON or even, some complex message format in here. And then when you call this service, it's going to respond exactly in the order that you told it to. So here I'm going to grab the endpoint for that real quick. I'm going to go to my browser, and I'm just going to pop this in. Okay, so there we go. I am currently getting response number 2 from my sequence responder. And so if I were to call this service again, I would then get response 3. And you can continue to do this and get whatever type of response you want from that service. Now, in this case, I've put a little YouTube video into the virtual service just to show you could do anything and to rickroll everybody on the call. And then when you run out of messages in the sequence, it starts over and you can do the entire sequence all over again. You could add as many sequence responders into your virtual asset as you want, putting whatever type of data into that. You could interlace that with regular services so that a particular response type is running in sequence. And we're finding, as we're working with different organizations, that this is just the right level of complexity to get a novice virtual user really rapidly started on a tool.
Chris, I think
I just lost my audio.
Yep.
Can you still hear me?
Yes.
Okay. I'm actually sorry. I'm just going to switch over to this one real here. Okay. Okay. But there is another place that this becomes really beneficial, and that is in the ability to create sequence responders like these from traffic. And so what I'm going to do real quick is I'm just going to show, here I've sort of created it manually and I put the piece in there, but if I wanted to, I could create a virtual service from traffic. I'll go ahead and go into my wizard here. And you'll notice that the wizards have been enhanced to give you a default response strategy. If you want to do correlated, where the data is put into the data repository and decisions are made based on different incoming requests, how to respond, you can do that. You can create single responses, which basically just means it'll always respond one way, or you could create the sequence. And there's some intelligence built into this, so that if you were to supply a traffic file that have different behavior types, it will automatically determine the best responder mode for that behavior type. Now, let me just kind of explain this a little bit. So here I'm using the solar system API, which basically has a get planets. It then says get planets into a particular order, and then post where you can update those planets. Now, if I were to turn off the auto configure here and look at the sequence responder, each one of these individual responses, I'm just going to put this over here real quick. The requests are all kind of the same, right? There's a little bit of data that's changing in them, but it's mostly just a cookie. But the responses, these responses, they're changing. These are actually quite large responses about each one of the different planets. And so the way that this service actually works is that every time you request it, you get a different planet in this particular order. And so the service virtualization traffic wizard said, you know what? That's a sequence responder. I'm going to automatically put this into that mode to make it easier for you to use that. However, this next call, or sequence of calls, the solar system post, these are a little different. Each one of these, if you look at the actual messages, there's things that are changing here. We're asking for different planets or celestial bodies, and then the response of those is those particular planets. So we don't necessarily want to do this one in order. We want to be intelligent about this one. And so the engine has said, you know, in order for this to work, I need to look at this item and I need to correlate it and create a data source and so on. And so through that, you can make really great virtual services that are a combination of sequence, simple, literal, correlated, and let the engine do the dirty work of deciding the best way to put that all together. And so through that, we can really easily simulate missing dependencies in our test ecosystem by leveraging sequence responders to simulate the complex stuff in a really, really easy way. Now, there's been a lot of additional features that have been added into 2020.1, and you can read all about these individual capabilities in the release notes. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to throw up a couple of links here. Go ahead and take a screenshot if you want here. We'll also put some of these links into the chat. You can also use those QR codes with your cell phone. Docs.parasoft.com will show us the latest release as well as all of the how-to information for how to use the solutions. There's a blog at blog.parasoft.com that's outlining the major features that have been introduced in this version. And then, of course, if you're looking at seeing any tutorials or videos, you can go ahead and take a look at our YouTube channel. And so with this release, we're really doubling down on our commitment to enable remote teams or teams that are not located all in the same area to work effectively. The Parasoft Continuous Quality Suite has the capability to associate those tests with the work item in your system of record for rapid prioritization. Our new enhancements to our deployments dashboard makes it really easy to, to see performance characteristics of virtual services, their uptime, their ROI, and see that from a holistic view and actually manage that as well. And then finally, sequence responders makes it really easy to create great virtual services that handle the complex stuff, plus a whole lot more. And so unless there's anything you wanted to add to that, Joy, I think I'll hand it over to you and we can start looking at any questions that we may have.
Yeah, great. Thanks, Chris. Excellent demonstration. And we're definitely excited that this new release has come out with some awesome new capabilities to help your teams work together more effectively. And we are ready to take your questions. So please do enter your questions about today's webinar in the Q&A window, and we will go through those. And I see there are some in the queue there. Chris, if you want to take a look.
All right, got my headset working here again. Here's a good question here. It says, can you containerize the SOAtests along with load tests? If yes, is there any documentation available for it? The answer is absolutely yes. So there are Docker containers available for both service virtualization, API testing. We create those servers as WAR files, so you can deploy them easily into a Docker container. In fact, my whole continuous quality suite that you've been seeing here is in a Docker container. You can then execute or build the API tests, execute the API tests. You can then create performance tests for those that can then be run from a master controller with our Parasoft load test. And the distributed load can be run in containers. We actually have containers that are available in Azure, EC2, AWS, and they're just agents. And so yeah, you can do both of those things. And the documentation is in the docs. Just look for reference architectures or deployment recommendations. I'll see if I can find that link and put it into the chat here. Okay, we have another question here about microservices. We can test microservices. We actually have added a lot of support for microservice specific protocols, such as Kafka, RabbitMQ, MQTT. Those message formats and protocols, protocol buffers can just be snapped into any API test that you're creating. And it would be just like creating a REST test, except that the payload may be of a different format, and the message format will have consumer and broker information, but it all feels the same, and it's all codeless. All right, we have another question here about resource permissions in the dashboard. So yeah, so you have the ability to connect the dashboard to your LDAP or your Active Directory system. We'll then import a list of groups and users, depending upon what you want your strategy to be. You can then associate those groups with different permissions and different resource permissions inside of the solution. So maybe certain teams have access to environments. Maybe there are servers that are dedicated to a particular team. Maybe you have an API test that you only want a specific user to be able to execute. You can define all of those from a resource permission perspective. Is there any possibility of import from JMeter? So I don't know if you're talking about from an API testing perspective, or probably you're talking from a performance testing perspective. One of the really cool things about the recorder is that you just put a proxy in between whatever traffic is happening, and that traffic could be taking place, as you saw, from the browser to the front end services. It could be taking place deep inside of my application. Maybe it's traffic. Maybe I point JMeter at a proxy. We actually do this for some customers that want to run their API tests as performance tests inside of load test from JMeter. You can just record that traffic, and then you use the AI to assemble that into a test case. Okay, can virtual services be used to emulate real services, not just missing? Okay, I think what you're asking is service simulation as opposed to simple mocking and stubbing. And so, and if this is wrong, just let me know what you were kind of trying to get at here. Service virtualization is like mocking on steroids. You can create a very simple mock. You really could. You could just deploy that, use it as just a test stub inside of your environment. And I think you get a lot of value from that. But what a lot of organizations do is they want to go beyond that. They want to create or recreate some of the services business rules inside of the virtual service. That way, multiple teams can use the virtual service in different ways, getting different responses depending upon how they're interacting with it, swapping in different data sources, so that you can make it really easy to reuse each one of those services. And so, yeah, we've done that for a couple of different places. I'm just going to go back to this resource page because I noticed somebody was asking. And so the service virtualization supports 150 message formats and protocols, all the way from simple SOAP and REST to EDI, or maybe you want to simulate a file system or an email client or a TCP connection. Maybe you want to kick off a script and write a file into a location. Maybe you want to insert rows into a database. Virtual services can do all of that. So I know that was a long answer, and I hope that's what you were asking. Do we have an API or plugin available for this if we need to integrate with any of the CI tool? Yeah, 100%. So not only do we have plugins available for Jenkins, TeamCity, Bamboo, VSTS, and you can learn all about that in our YouTube channel where we show how those native plugins work. I think they're pretty cool. But also, one of the things that I articulated as being a part of this release was this open API that we have. Everything that you saw being done in the continuous testing platform and inside of the desktops could be done via a REST API. And so it is one of our tools that we leverage when executing from CI systems, maybe a homegrown CI system or one of the systems that I didn't reference. But yeah, that REST API allows you to create test case, execute test case, provision virtual services, generate test data, everything can all be done from that API. And it's pretty friendly to use too. Okay, you briefly mentioned about the home office setup. Can you have the entire test suite deployed via VPN on private desktops? Well, so yeah, you could if you wanted to use just the desktops. And there are some things that the desktops do that the browser doesn't. So I could see maybe that would be why you'd want to do that. What you would then do is you would allow somebody to connect to that desktop and share those artifacts via source control. But I'll tell you, probably the really good way to do this would be to set up a central server, one or two, give everybody a desktop installation on their machine, and then set up your VPN so that the browser is displaying the artifacts from the servers inside of your infrastructure. That way you're totally fenced off, it's totally secure, it's totally safe. The only way to access it is via VPN to the browser. Then you can create your test artifacts, you can do whatever. You could even have the desktops on your local machine and then push those test cases to the server if you wanted. All of that's available. And I think it's a really good question. So maybe reach out to us maybe reach out to us if you want to follow up on that particular question. Okay, let me just look real quickly through the chat here. I think that's it. So I'm going to go ahead and hand it back to you, Joy, to finish this out.
Great, thanks so much, Chris, and thanks to the attendees for the great questions. We definitely want to encourage you to check out our YouTube site and register for future webinars. Those are also linked in the chat window. So if you do have other questions, feel free to reach out to us via our website, and feel free to check out other resources available to you on our blog, in our website, and in our YouTube channel. Thank you very much for attending today, and we appreciate your time. Have a great day.